What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the 100 Fantasy Football channel. If we're meeting for the first time, my name is Ivan Herrera. The purpose of this channel is to bring purposeful community to fantasy football, and I'm really excited that you're all here today. Do me a favor, hit that like button for me. That would mean so much to me, as well as that subscribe button, so that way you're always notified whenever I go live or whenever I make uploads. Typically I go live once a week and then I upload a few videos on Sunday. Now let me go ahead and quickly get into the players that I would consider cutting, and this is a tough one just because with fantasy football, it's such an emotional game, right? We invest so much time, so much energy, so much research into certain players, and when you come to your draft, you're obviously full of so much hope, right? You have so much excitement. You obviously now are looking forward to which players are going to land and like certain slots, and sometimes these players don't pan out, and this is the really hard part of fantasy football, of when do you cut bait with certain players that you thought were going to be phenomenal. And that's why I'm going to be going over players you may need to cut. So we're going to go rapid fire here. The format of how it's going to go is I'm going to share with you the ADP of the player, which is basically their average draft position on where they're typically were going in drafts. And I'm going to go over where they're currently ranked right now going into week number 8. And then I'm going to build a case whether or not you should drop them or if you should keep them. So I'm going to quickly go through that. I have a few players on there. I have about 5 that are very popular, the ones that I myself have drafted that I myself got wrong. And that's, I think, one of the differences of me and some other analysts. I'm not afraid to say I'm wrong. Like, because fantasy football is hard to predict, like already. And some calls we get right. More times than not, we're going to get some calls wrong, but I'm not afraid to make those calls. So the first one, and this one really bums me out, is Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon coming into the season was extremely exciting for me personally, just because of the talent, because of the offense with Kyle Shanahan, the scheme. I thought, man, this is going to be perfect for Trey Sermon. He's going to have a phenomenal season, but it just hasn't panned out. He was the 78th overall, so he was on average going in the 78 range as far as ADP, which puts him in around the 5th, 6th round range. And I personally got him in the 5th round for one of my drafts. A few of my buddies thought I was overreaching, and so far they're absolutely right. He currently is the running back 73. He's had only one touch. He had only one touch in week 5, wasn't even involved in week 6. And it's just, in week 7, they had their bye in week 6. But it's just all bad. And he's just going down the depth chart. Now with the rise of Elijah Mitchell, and even with Hasty involved, it just shows that there isn't much there with Trey Sermon. So I had to make the realization that I had to cut him, and if you have Trey Sermon, he doesn't belong on your roster anymore. His teammate is also on here as well, and this one was a bummer because this one makes no sense to me, and that is Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk was going overall 61 in ADP. That's in the 4th, 5th round. That's really high. And with all the talent that you see in that range, that's where you saw Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, some of these like pretty solid wide receivers. Chris Godwin was probably a little bit higher, but he's still within that range, right? He's someone that is just absolutely just been a heartbreak, and it's crazy. He's currently right now wide receiver 94. He's had 4 games with single-digit outputs, so he hasn't even hit the double-digit mark more than twice this season, and that's just obviously depressing because last year he was like lightning in a bottle in his rookie season. But unfortunately, I don't know what's going on over there with Kyle Shanahan. He has both of these players in the doghouse, so both of them for me are cuts that don't belong on fantasy football rosters. The next one is Ronald Jones. So going into the season, I thought with Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, the one you wanted to get was Ronald Jones. But man, have I been wrong with that one. I mean, Leonard Fournette has just been utilized in the passing game. He's been used a lot more, and Ronald Jones just isn't there. He was drafted 88 overall on ADP. Currently, he's running back 67. He's only had one game with double-digit touches, so he's just not getting the work, and because of that, he just doesn't belong on your fantasy football roster. So you can cut bait with Ronald Jones Jr. And the next player I have two more. And the last one I'm more on the fence on, which is why I saved them for last. But the next one is Ty'Son Williams. With all the injuries that Baltimore saw, with, of course, you had J.K. Dobbins out, then you had Gus Edwards go out too, and then with the signing of Latavius Murray, Le'Veon Bell, and Devontae Freeman, Ty'Son Williams was the one that did phenomenal in Week 1 versus the Raiders, but we haven't seen much production ever since. And last week I think is a prime example of that, because last week both Devontae Freeman and Le'Veon Bell each got 20 more snaps than him in that game, which just shows you where he's currently ranked in that depth chart. And because of that, just don't even bother. He's not worth the roster spot. Not even consider. Cut. I'm telling you right now, cut Ty'Son Williams. He doesn't belong on your fantasy roster. You can find upside somewhere else. Let go of him. He's good to go. Now, the last player, this is a tough one because I still have him in a couple of rosters, and I'm still on the fence on this, so I'm not going to tell you to fully cut him. And this is Robbie Anderson. So Robbie Anderson, he was drafted 76 overall on average, which puts him around that 7th round range. Phenomenal value there, just because of the fact that he got so much volume last season, and he's still getting the volume right now. He's currently wide receiver 62, and this one's tough because in the past 4 games he's had 7 targets or more. 2 of those 4 games he's had 11 targets, and it's just nuts because he hasn't had over 57 yards this season. He did that only once in Week 1, and that was his only reception, as well as it was 1 reception for 56 yards. For 57 yards. And it was a touchdown. So Robbie Anderson for me isn't a cut, only because the target share is there. However, if you need the roster spot, I wouldn't look at you sideways if you cut him. But this one's rough just because, man, like, you really thought he was going to put up some big numbers this season. I mean, and Teddy Bridgewater was able to sustain 2 wide receivers with over 1,000 yards, and that was, of course, both DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, but we're just not seeing it, and that's just really the unfortunate part. So thank you so much for making it to the very end of this video. If you found value in it, I would highly appreciate if you hit that like button, subscribe as well, so that way you know whenever I drop a video. As always, best of luck to you this weekend, and have a safe, happy Halloween, and keep it 100.